big time banger on the main card at featherweight in ranked action. We have the return. It's been 588 days away for Giga Chikadze's last time out, a fight of the night against Calvin Kattar, where he took a lot of damage. And for Chikadze, he gets the return in action against Alex Caceres, who won in a co-main event back in June against Daniel Pineda. That was also a fight of the night. So both of these guys, they are absolute bonus machines. And Alex Caceres ranked 15th in this division. He's 16-11 with 1 no contest. Who has he not fought? He's fought Max Holloway, right?
He has.
He's fought some of the best guys
Rodriguez
in this division. And maybe he hasn't come out on the winningest of ends, but for Caceres since June of 2019, he's 7-1, and he's been ultra competitive, picking up bonuses, picking up finishes, and now he's looking to really kind of jump the line in a ultra stacked featherweight division. For Chikadze, the long layoff, he did a little bit of that Radio Row there at UFC X, the fan experience, back in July, and he touched on the fact that fights with Sadiq Youssef fell out. A teased fight against Brian Ortega, yeah, that was a real thing that they were targeting. That one fell out as well. And he also said when he did his interview with MMA Junkie Radio, Gorgeous George goes, he said that he went through 5 surgeries between the last time that we saw him fight to now. So Chikadze, it also seemed like he broke his right hand, and he kind of touched on that. The last 2 fights, the Calvin Kattar fight and the Barboza fight, he had a broken right hand. He was able to get that repaired. A lot of stem cells, a lot of doctor visits, and now he's back in there. And we said it earlier on in this card. Junior Tafa, Glory Lineage. Giga Chikadze, Glory Lineage. And I wasn't sold on Chikadze off his performance on Contender Series. 2018, he lost to Austin Springer. He wanted to show that extra wrinkle to his game being the grappling. And when he did, he ended up getting finished. And if you want to play MMA math, Alex Caceres beat Austin Springer in the UFC. But Chikadze went back to the regional scene, beat a couple of guys that had pulses, and then he ended up in there against Brandon Davis. He continues his winning ways. He had a really wild fight against a good fighter, Jamal Emmers. That was a really memorable one. But Chikadze ended up continuing to level up. He beats Barboza. He beats Cub Swanson, and then he ends up in that Kattar fight. And I know I said it was a fight of the night. 50-45s and a 50-44. It was kind of like how Chris Mutino, Sean O'Malley was a fight of the night.
I think it was a little bit more competitive than the scorecards might suggest. He lost, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought Giga won, but he did hit Calvin Kattar with some really good shots. And I'm not going to sit here and say I think Alex Caceres would do much better in that type of a matchup. So this is what I have a really hard time with. Outside of the time off and the injuries, I think Giga Chikadze wins this fight. Not easily, but Alex Caceres doesn't have a lot of the obvious skill sets that Giga Chikadze struggles with. What does Giga struggle with? If you get on the inside of his kicking range and force him to become a boxer, you can have success in that one range. Caceres normally implements his kicks in all of his striking exchanges, and not that Caceres can't grapple, but he's not of that nth degree to where, okay, you have to respect his takedown attempts so much to where you're dropping your hands and almost sprawling preemptively to defend those kind of takedowns. So if Alex Caceres decides he's just going to stand on the outside and strike with Giga Chikadze, I just don't know how much margin of error that gives him in this fight, because Chikadze's the much more devastating striker between these two. His kicks, his punches, when he's landing them, he is very damaging.
Giga Chikadze, in his short time in the UFC, 7th all-time in featherweight history with a knockdown average per 15 minutes of .89. That's behind your guy, Chad Mendes.
I love Chad Mendez's fights so much, it's ridiculous. One of my favorite fighters to watch of all time. But that's the big thing about Chikadze. Yes, on the outside, he might not be the highest volume, right? He can get caught just staring. But if Alex Caceres is throwing a high volume at him, I remember saying this a lot when Petr Yan fought Aljamain Sterling the first time. What's Yan so good at? Holding his hands up and just waiting for you to show him everything, and then he decides to go. I think Chikadze can have a similar game plan in this matchup. Wait for Alex Caceres to throw a lot of his volume, really start moving downhill, and that's going to leave you even more openings to start countering off the back foot. And yes, in a 15-minute fight, you do worry that he could, lose that first round, have a close second round, and then who knows what's going to happen in the third. But if these guys match each other strike for strike, I favor Chikadze. If Caceres goes for a lot of takedowns, I could see that just tiring him out, especially as the fight goes on, because Chikadze, for as good a power that he has, he's not a guy who's going to go out there and overthrow a lot of his shots like a Vanderlei Silva. He's not going to sit down and throw massive looping hooks to where, okay, Caceres might be able to move out of the way and counter with his own power. So I hate to be so one-sided in this, but I do really struggle to see how Caceres is going to go out there and win rounds.
If he's going to be able to go out there and grapple, I think he can win rounds. And Chikadze's talked about that, even talked about that in the Radio Row interviews. I've been training in the gi, I've been training no gi, I've been doing a lot of grappling. He talked about that before the Springer fight. and then it got him caught. Caceres is a guy that you don't want to screw around with any of that. You remember the Seungwoo Choi fight that we referenced earlier? Caceres gets dropped, he then gets the back, he gets the choke. Caceres is a grappler like that, where you can be sneaky in those positions.
He's also been out-grappled a number of times.
4 performance bonuses in the UFC, 4 fight of the nights for Caceres. For Giga, performances in every fight. Jamie Simmons, Giga kick against Cub Swanson, the Edson Barboza win, and then of course against Calvin Kattar. And for Chikadze, I had like one of those one-off videos before the fight. It was a key to a Giga Chikadze win. What was the key? I'll spoil it now. It was pacing. Giga Chikadze is one of those guys that tends to pace himself in 3-round and in limited sample size 5-round fights. He got struck on the outside and couldn't get past the jab and the 1-2s of Calvin Kattar.
That's
in that
more on the
matchup.
inside. Though on the outside, Chikadze can kick. On the inside where jabs are happening, I would say that's more middle to inside range.
If you've got a long jab,
you're still... Boxing is never on the outside because you're not throwing kicks in MMA.
Calvin
MMA,
Kattar had
kicks.
a nice long jab, and Giga Chikadze didn't throw his right hand and didn't throw his kicks. So in this one, I don't know what Giga Chikadze is going to look like. I need to see this fight before I can make an approximation on the rest. So I kind of stay away from this one pop and popcorn wise. Chikadze is a pretty big favorite coming off the layoff, the injuries. Alex Caceres, again, so hot right now. Finished Julian Erosa, the head kick knockout seen around the world last year. And then, of course, last time out against Daniel Pineda, a really wild fight. And he was able to win out in the striking, the grappling in that one. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. One guy's a fan favorite. One guy's hovered around that.
They both are easily.
Again, you don't see a lot of people going to a party going, man, Alex Caceres is my favorite fighter.
You ever heard anybody say that about Bernie Garcia, Rinya Nakamura, Aaron Blanchfield, Anthony Smith, or Ryan Spann? Because I haven't either. At least Alex Caceres has been in the main event of fight nights before, unlike a lot of these fighters.
Nobody's saying, past the chip dip, I can't get ready for an 0-2 Fernie Garcia performance. Nothing will surprise me out of this one. The fans, I'm going to say over under 80% Giga Chikadze.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over, I swear. 770 total votes, 80% Chikadze, 56% by decision, 37% by knockout. For the 20% that have Caceres, 52% by decision, 32% by submission. Again, unless Alex Caceres is able to control distance with his kicks and then crowd the inside and go for some of the grappling, I think Giga Chikadze can get the win in this
I've got Giga in this matchup. This to me really does feel like a get back on the horse kind of a fight. Like Calvin Kattar's a difficult matchup for pretty much anybody who's not going to fight for the title immediately. Like that's how good Calvin Kattar is. And I know Chikadze didn't look great in that matchup, but again, if Caceres fought Calvin Kattar, it's probably going to look the same, if not even worse. So I don't think you can put a ton of stock into that. I do worry about the injuries and the time off, especially both guys are 35, right? 145. That's not an age we see a ton of guys have success afterwards at, so we'll be curious as to whether or not age catches up to either one of them, but I do have Giga Chikadze.
We'll see if Caceres can utilize that tricky southpaw stance and a little bit of an uptick in volume compared to Chikadze. Will it be the Georgian winning out? Both of us going with the returning Ninja Chikadze to get the win. A big-time co-main event coming up. It's a rematch of a 2021 main event. We have Anthony Lionheart Smith take on Ryan Superman Spann. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.